Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Miller. Every week, I chat with fascinating people from all walks of life in order to bring you knowledge, inspiration, and insight. If you enjoy the show, you can support it by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with a friend. This is the Jeremy Miller Podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. This is the Bighorn 100-mile Ultramarathon recap podcast. As you can see, I'm sitting here in my mother's living room in Casper, Wyoming, where I grew up. Not in this house specifically, but here in this town of beautiful Casper, Wyoming. It is Thursday, June 20th. I just completed the Bighorn 100-mile trail race on Saturday. I started the race last Friday, finished on Saturday morning. So it's been, I think, four or 5 days since I completed the race. I'm definitely tired still. Some brain fog, just very mentally tired. Physically, my body is getting better. I'm back to running, which is great. My legs feel pretty recovered. I can still tell I don't have all the spring and pop to them that they usually do, but we are able to go run. I do have a broken toe, which we will get into later in this episode, but overall, feeling good. The race was hard. It was very, very hard. Probably the hardest, definitely the hardest physical challenge I've taken on so far. It was difficult, but we set out and we got it done. So in this episode, how I'm going to break it down is first I'm going to read off some interesting stats from the race. And then I'm going to give you a full recap of the race from the week leading into the race, how I prepped prior to the race, the days leading up, the race day itself, what I've done since then. Then I'm going to go into some lessons learned. Mostly like mental things that I took away from the race that I think everybody can benefit from, not just in running, but in life in general. I think that's one of the greatest things about running is it's this tool to develop our minds for not just sports and athletics and activities, but for real life as well. So I'll dive into some of those lessons that I took away from the race. And then I'll wrap up the episode with a Q&A from questions from you guys. I put out a poll on Instagram, got a ton of questions from you guys, so I kind of pulled them all together, the most common questions and the ones that I thought would provide the most value to you guys. So I'll answer lots of those questions here at the end. But let's first dive into the stats from the race. Also, I don't do a lot of solo episodes. I love having guests on. I love getting to chat with other people. But I figured that my first 100-mile ultramarathon was worthy of a solo episode. So here we are. Bear with me. I don't do a lot of these. I'll try and get through it as best I can. But excited to have you guys here listening, and I'll provide as much knowledge, insight, information as I can to hopefully help you run a faster, better 100-mile race. If you're making the transition from marathon up to a 100-miler, marathon to ultramarathon, whatever it is that you're doing, hopefully I'll provide some information and value for you guys here in this episode. But anyways, let's get into it. Some stats from the race. So we had 100 miles, 18,370 feet of elevation gain, and 18,370 feet of elevation loss. Lots of gain, lots of loss. Basically, no part of the course is flat. You're either going up or down at any given point. It's the mountains, so that's how mountains are. We finished in 26 hours, 48 minutes. That is an average of 16 minutes and 5 seconds per mile. I'm very, very happy with that. My goal for the race was really just to finish. But my I guess, optimistic or kind of realistic goal somewhere in the middle there was to break 27 hours, and we went 26:48. So I'm very happy with how it went. Again, getting the thing done was like the main goal, and we definitely did that. So some other stats I thought were interesting. 208,000 steps over those 26, almost 27 hours. A lot of steps. 17,900 calories burned. Let me say that again. 17,900 calories burned. Crazy amount of calories burned. However, crazy amount of calories eaten. One of the best parts about running is you get to eat basically as much as you want. So I had 7,900 calories just from gels. Yes, almost 8,000 calories just from gels. And for gels, I was using Morton Gel 160, Spring Energy Awesome Sauce, and untapped maple syrup. And I was just alternating. I would go every other gel was a Morton 160 every 30 minutes. So let me just break it down, kind of how it looked. So at the 30-minute mark, take a Morton Gel 160. At the hour mark, take a Spring Awesome Sauce. At the 90-minute mark, take a Morton 160. At the 2-hour mark, take a untapped maple syrup. So it was a 2-to-1 Morton to Spring and Awesome Sauce, or Spring and untapped. So basically half of my gels were Morton. I have some brain fog still, so hopefully that made sense. Bear with me. Again, 7,900 calories from gels, 2,000 calories consumed from solid foods. That included fruit, some hash browns, broth, I guess you could consider into solid foods. I had 1 piece of beef jerky. I had like 3 bites of a potato bacon tortilla wrap. I had a small peanut butter and jelly sandwich that was like 2 bites. Lots of oranges, some watermelon, some grapes. I'm not really big on solid foods during ultramarathons. I just have a hard time. My stomach is fine with it, but I just have a hard time like chewing it, getting it down. You're breathing hard usually. You don't have a lot of extra saliva in your mouth to help break it down. And I have a tricky time getting the solid foods to go down, so I usually just don't mess with them. Once they're down, I don't have any issues, which is good, but it's just tricky getting them down. So primarily gels. And then I had 22,000 milligrams of sodium consumed, and that was primarily through Switchback electrolytes. I was taking 1 stick pack, which is 1,000 milligrams of sodium, every 1 to 2 hours, roughly, depending on the temperature, the time of day, which section of the course. If I was running uphill or going downhill, the effort level might change. But Switchback electrolytes, and then also salt pills, which I wasn't taking salt pills on a like scheduled basis. It was really just on like an as needed, as I was feeling basis. So there's one section of the course where I'll get into. It was really, really hot, and I just started swallowing a bunch of salt pills, taking a bunch of water, and I was feeling some cramps coming on, and fortunately that helped mitigate the cramps, and never fully cramped. But I think the salt pills, the electrolytes, all that obviously helped. So 22,000 milligrams of sodium. And then I also calculated out 13 liters of water drank. And I peed a lot. My hydration was amazing, honestly. I peed every few hours, and my pee was always clear the whole time. Pee was clear. I think this is a good tip for anybody running a race of any distance. For your hydration, just pay attention to what color your pee is and how often you're peeing. If you're peeing on a regular basis, if it makes sense that you're peeing for how much you're drinking, then you're probably in a good spot. And if your pee is clear, basically just keep doing what you're doing. Maybe keep taking some more sodium, either clear or like very light yellow. Basically just keep doing what you're doing. If your pee starts getting darker and darker, then you're going to want to either pull back on the sodium, increase your water intake, or both. But usually start with one of those two things first. Hydration is a very, very tricky thing. It's a very fine balance, and I was fortunate enough to not really have any issues with that, even though it was super hot and then obviously super cold at night. So pee was clear the whole time, consistently peeing, so very happy with that. Again, 13 liters of water drank, and then 4 liters of milk drank. I didn't add those calories into the 2,000 calories consumed from solid food. So 4 liters of raw milk is roughly 2,000 calories, give or take. So if you add up all my calories consumed, it would be around 12,000 calories consumed throughout the course of 100 miles, 26 and a half hours. So lots of calories consumed, basically zero stomach issues. Again, very fortunate with that. I did not go number 2 at all. There's a couple times I felt like I could have, but it didn't seem like too necessary. And I was like, okay, if I don't really need to go, I'm not even going to try to go, because I am partially worried that if I try to go and I do go, it's going to like send a signal to my stomach that, oh, we can go to the bathroom if we need to. And it's just going to open the floodgates. And I didn't want that. So didn't even try to go. And I just, stomach was great. Very, very fortunate. Stomach is a massive part of these long races, obviously. So the fact that we were able to get through it with no issues was a huge win. So those are the stats from the race. Now let's dive into let's dive back to week before the race. So we traveled up from Austin, Texas. Bree, our two golden boys, and me went up to here, Casper, Wyoming, Saturday before the race started. Really just to acclimate to the elevation and the altitude, because here in Casper, it's a mile high, roughly 5,000 feet. The Bighorn 100-mile ultramarathon is anywhere from 3,000 up to 9,200 feet elevation. So lots of elevation fluctuations. And the cool thing with altitude acclimation is, a lot of people are very curious about this, and I was as well, is it takes about 3 to 4 days to get about 80% acclimated. So if you have a race on Saturday, if you show up Tuesday, you can get about 80% acclimated to the elevation, which is amazing. So it happens relatively quickly. So we actually went up to the Bighorns once we arrived here in Wyoming, spent 3 days camping, right around 10,000 feet elevation, did a 3-hour trail run with the dogs, my last long run, ran through rivers and lakes and streams and on some just amazingly beautiful trails that we have here in Wyoming, and got acclimated. And the first couple hours of running, I could definitely feel the elevation, could definitely feel the altitude. But by the end of the run, I felt fine. Like at the beginning of the run, I was breathing hard. I could barely talk. And by the end of it, I felt normal. So it's crazy how quickly our bodies are able to adapt and acclimate. Obviously, it does take a few days. So sleeping up at 10,000 feet definitely helped. And just spending time at elevation was crucial. So if you have a race coming up at elevation and you don't live at elevation, take that into mind, that within 3 to 4 days, you can get mostly acclimated. And then that last 20% acclimation, I believe, takes about 30 days total. So that last finishing piece takes a while, but you can get mostly acclimated fairly quickly. After we camped, we came back here to Casper. I picked up my friend Pierce, who is pacing me for the race. Picked up Drew and Bradford, who also flew in here to Casper. They're camera guys. I wanted out on the course to help document this journey. So picked them up. I prepped all my gear. Prep my drop bags. Drop bags, if you don't know, super, super convenient part of these longer races. Basically, you pack bags of whatever you need, and then there's designated aid stations on the course where you can have a drop bag. And you take your drop bag when you go to the packet pickup, drop it off, tell them where you want it. They will bus it or drive it out to that part of the course. And then when you get to that part of the course on race day, they pull your bib number and they go grab your bag, and then before you know it, you've got your bag of things that you packed out in the middle of the mountains. It is glorious. It is a fantastic thing. So I had 5 drop bags total, and those 5 drop bags went to 5 different aid stations, all the crewable, all the drop bag accessible aid stations. So every chance I had for a drop bag, I was going to have one. And the way that I like to treat drop bags is I like to, even though I have a crew that I anticipate is going to be at each aid station, I don't know that they're going to be at each aid station. They might get a flat tire. Somebody might get hurt. They might get lost. Something might happen where the crew cannot get to the aid station. And in the event that happens, I would still like to have my things. I need my gels, extra socks, shoes, all that kind of stuff. And so I basically plan the drop bags as if I will not see the crew. And if the crew happens to make it there, perfect. Then I get to see the crew, plus I get my drop bag. So prepped all that stuff. Thursday, day before the race, we drove back up to Sheridan, Wyoming, which is near the race. We did the packet pickup. We did a 2-mile shakeout run. We got dinner with the whole crew and kind of did a crew meeting the night before we all went to sleep. Told everybody where to go, made a plan of who's taking what vehicles, the routes to go, make sure that everybody had the maps downloaded on their phone. I made an entire PDF showing my estimated arrival times at each aid station based on like a 24-hour, 30-hour, and 35-hour finish. I provided them as much information as possible. That way, make the crew's job as easy as possible. They just show up, follow my instructions. I even made a list of like everything I would need at each aid station. Really, I gave them an entire bag and just said, just bring this. I'll know what I need. As long as you're there with this bag, that's all that's needed. So I think if you're doing one of these races and you're going to have a crew, plan out everything ahead of time. I've been on multiple crews at races where they don't plan anything, and it's an absolute nightmare. People are wasting time at aid stations, and that's valuable time that you just don't need to be wasting during the race. So planning all this out ahead of time is crucial. And as I'm going to get into here just briefly, our aid station stops were so efficient. I think on average, it was like 4 minutes at each aid station. It was super, super efficient. Some people take 15, 20 minutes there, and it's just a real big waste of time for no reason. So planning all this out ahead of time is crucial. That's one of the biggest tips I can give you. Race morning, I woke up at about 4:45 a.m. I tried going to bed earlier, or I tried sleeping in because the race doesn't start till 9 a.m., but I was just antsy, I think. My nerves were going. I was excited to get out into the mountains and start running. So up at 4:45 a.m., kind of just laid in bed for a few hours, couldn't fall back asleep. Got out of bed around 7, had my typical endurance drink concoction, as I call it, with switchback electrolytes, a Morton 320 mix, 2 before blackcurrant powder. I also had some cordyceps mushroom capsules, which, if you don't know, help with endurance and are very helpful at elevation. Basically helps to dilate your blood vessels and increase your blood flow, which helps with oxygen flow and all that good stuff. Then we drove over to the start line. There were around, I think, 350 total runners running this. So got to the start line, 350 runners, plus all their families and crew and friends and everything. There was probably over 1,000 people there. The energy was electric. There's nothing quite like that start line energy when you're just ready to run. And it's a fine balance because it's hard to get too amped up for something like a 100-mile race, something that long, because within just a couple of minutes, that energy is going to be gone. When you're out on the trails, you're by yourself, it's starting to get hard. That energy that you got so amped up with at the beginning of the race is going to be gone so quickly. So I try to just kind of stay level, stay grounded as much as I can, and not get too amped up. But also, I like leaning into it a little bit because it's fun. That's one of my favorite parts of the race is the beginning. I will say this: I think my favorite miles of any race, whether it's an ultra or a marathon, whatever it is the first mile and the last mile. Those are my 2 favorite miles. We started the race at 9 a.m. We started out with a nice 4,000-foot climb over about 13 miles to the first aid station, which was Dry Fork. I felt great through here. I think the first few hours of any long race like this always go really quickly. Time kind of just flies by because you're so amped up, you're excited, you feel good, you're tapered, you're just soaking in the beauty. The course is so beautiful. We're just running down this big canyon. There's a giant flowing river next to us. There's these huge rock walls. Such a beautiful course. And that first big climb was a doozy. I want to say it took about 3 hours to go 13 miles with the 4,000 feet of elevation gain. But I felt good through there. I knew what to expect. Felt great. That first main aid station at Dry Fork, 13 miles in, that was the first time I would be able to see the crew. And I was in and out. I think I had Bree time every aid station. I told her to set a 10-minute timer. And at the 5-minute mark, give me a warning. And then at the 10-minute mark, say, okay, that's been 10 minutes. I had sat down, swapped out my gels really fast, refilled my waters, put more electrolytes, more Morton in. And Bree's like, or I said, Bree, what time do we got? She said 7:50. And I was like, we've already been here for 7 minutes? And she's like, no, you've got 7 minutes, 50 seconds left of the 10 minutes. I was like, oh, shoot, so we've been here for like 2 minutes. And that's when I knew we were in a good spot. So literally after that, I was like, okay, well, I think I'm ready to go. I felt like I should have stayed and sat longer almost because I was like, I have all this extra time, but obviously if we had extra time, might as well utilize it, making forward progress on the course. So hopped up, said bye to the crew, and we were off. So literally 2 minutes in and out of that first aid station. Very, very efficient. Then started the next section of the course from Dry Fork to Footbridge, so mile 13 to mile 30. This section, is when it started getting tough. Mostly just because it was so hot. At this point, it was around noon to 4 o'clock. So this was going to be the hottest part of the day. This is also the lowest section of the course. I think we were around, well, not the lowest, but lower compared to others. I think we were like 5,000 or 6,000 feet. There's like these long kind of rolling hills. Everything kind of looks the same. I started getting not cramps, but pulsing sensations, you can call it, in my adductors, which I've gotten them before during a trail race, and usually they end up grabbing if I don't do anything about them. But fortunately, this is when I started slamming salt pills, drinking a bunch of water, and those pulses after about 10 minutes just kind of went away, and they never fully grabbed. I think it's due to taking the sodium tablets and the water. And for those asking or curious, I was just taking literally generic sodium chloride tablets. I think it's a pack of like 200 tablets. It's like $10. They're just very generic. Literally, it's 1,000 milligrams of 1,000 milligrams of salt. So 600 milligrams of sodium, 400 milligrams of chloride, roughly. And the cramps never fully grabbed, which was amazing. This section, we went down the wall around mile 27. So there's this infamous section on the Bighorn course called the wall, mostly for when you're coming up the course, when we went back, because it's an out and back course. And it's so steep. Running down is fine, obviously, because running downhill is easy. It's low effort. But this is also the most beautiful part of the course. You're just up on this big ridge. You're overlooking this huge valley. There's wildflowers everywhere. There's this giant canyon to your left. There's this huge rock wall to your right. Super, super beautiful. Easily my favorite part of the course. It's amazing. Got down to Footbridge. I think it was around 4 p.m. or so. This was mile 30. Saw the crew again. Had my drop bag there. I still didn't need to change socks or shoes. The Bighorn course, is infamously muddy. However, this year it was a quote-unquote dry year, and I can attest to this. I did the Bighorn 52 last year and the year before, 2022 and 2023, and during this section of the course, it would have been very, very muddy the last couple of years, but this year, basically no mud, which was fantastic. So I didn't need to change my socks or shoes yet. Don't worry, we get into the mud later. Plenty of mud on this course, but just not yet, which is great. So again, quick in and out of Footbridge, mile 30. I think this time was maybe 3 minutes or so. We're moving just a touch slower, just because I was a little bit more tired at this point, but still very, very efficient stop. And then from here, from Footbridge up to Jaws, so from mile 30 to 48, this was the biggest climb in the course. It's a 5,000 foot climb over 18 miles. You get basically no downhill. It's just this long, steady climb for 18 miles. It ended up taking me about 5 hours to do this climb, 5 hours to do 18 miles. But it's so beautiful. Again, you're going up this canyon. There's a big river next to you. This course is so beautiful. I think that's what makes Bighorn so interesting, is because it's so hard, it's so brutal, so much up and down, mud, technical. There's these long, relentless climbs and descents, but at the same time, it's so beautiful. It's this weird kind of dichotomy of like pain and beauty, and I just love it so much because your body is just trash. Your body hurts. You're tired. It's hard, and you almost like. Some parts of me almost get like mad because the course is so hard. I don't know who I'm mad at. I'm not like mad at the mountains or anything. It's just like, I'm just like, oh my gosh, why is this so hard? Why can't it just be like a nice flat road? But then I look around and I'm like, this is so beautiful. It's just gorgeous. And so it's just this very weird kind of relationship between pain and beauty, which is, again, why I've loved this course so much. And yeah, Bighorn. It holds a special place in my heart, without a doubt. Anyways, back to the climb, 5,000 feet, 18 miles. The sun started to set. It was around 8 or 9 p.m. Sun was setting. It started to get chilly out. And the last 3 miles coming into Jaws at the turnaround, mile 48. It was so muddy. There's pools of water everywhere, pools of 6-inch deep mud. Feel like your shoes are going to get sucked off your feet. Some sections, there's just like this giant field of just muddy water you have to run through. You have no choice but to run through it. So your feet are soaking wet, your socks are wet. This is when I could kind of feel some blisters coming on because I've already been on my feet for nearly 12 hours at this point. My feet are tired. You know, that one tiny little rubbing spot in your shoe that's a very micro piece of friction. Compound that over 12 hours, 48 miles, you're going to probably get a blister. So add that in with muddy feet and wet socks, and I could feel little blisters starting to come on. So when we got to Jaws, this was again around 9 p.m. The sun was beginning to set, starting to get dark out and cold. I changed my socks, kept my same shoes on because the shoes have been fine. And also, because it's an out and back course, I just ran through all this mud. Once I get to the aid station, I'm going to turn around and basically go straight back through the mud. So I at least changed my socks to have a fresh pair. I don't know if it really would have made that big of a difference either way because 10 minutes later, I was already back running through the mud. Went ahead and changed them anyways. This is where I had some hash browns. I had some milk. I was chugging milk at all the aid stations. Had some fruit. Had some broth here. They tried giving me some mashed potatoes. I think I just, in the chaos of everything, I forgot about the mashed potatoes, so I didn't eat any of those. But this aid station stop, I think, was maybe 7 to 10 minutes. This one took a little bit longer just because I had to change out my socks and stuff. We also taped up my toes here. And I've been using Luco tape on my toes and my feet to prevent blisters, and that has helped tremendously. During training, I tended to get hot spots or blisters in the same spots every time, so I started taping it. No blisters there, but the blisters I was getting during Bighorn were on areas I hadn't taped yet, so we threw some tape on. It was mostly like around the front of my toes or like underneath the bottom of my toes, so very weird spots, but that's where I started getting blisters. Threw some tape on there. Reapplied Sport Shield, which is this like stick of lube that I just rub all over my feet. I lube the heck out of it. Throw the tape over the top. The tape is so sticky, it'll stick over the lube, which is fantastic. Swapped at Jaws. I threw on, because it's getting cold, I threw on a hat, gloves, jacket, and then I picked up my pacer, my first pacer, Dan Holguin, the roster runner. Many of you guys probably know him from the podcast or through any of his amazing adventures that he does. He's an experienced 100-mile ultramarathon mountain runner. So picked him up at Jaws, mile 48. And basically now we run 52 miles back down the mountain into the town of Dayton, where we will finish this 100-mile race. But we've still got 52 miles to go. And honestly, this is where I think the race definitely got harder as we went on. But this is where I think it really got hard for the first time. Because, again, I'd already been running for 12 hours. I had 48 miles on my legs. It's getting dark. I'm getting tired. I know I'm going to have to do the next 7 to 8 hours through the dark. Still have 52 miles to go. And just mentally knowing, like, the out and back course is so tricky because you get to you get all the way out, 48 miles, halfway point, basically. And in my mind, I'm just retracing my steps over the last 12 hours, thinking about all the different places I saw, all the different parts of the trails, all the parts that I knew were going to be hard, like big climbs, big downhills. And I just started thinking, oh my gosh, it felt like forever getting up here. Now I have to turn around and go back and do it again. So this is actually where most people in the race drop. If you go through all the race stats, the vast majority of people that drop out of the race drop at Jaws. And I think a lot of it has to do with that mindset of, okay, we're halfway. Oh my gosh, now I'm thinking about all the shit we just went through and we have to go do it again. Like that's daunting mentally. So I understand it. And I kind of anticipated that. I think so much of this stuff is when there's so many unknowns in 100-mile races. And when you encounter an unknown or something you hadn't thought about yet, I think that's where things can go bad. And so in the last really year that I knew I was going to be running this race, I have gone through, I feel like every possible scenario that I could have anticipated and said, okay, when I get to mile 48, 50, halfway point, and I start to realize like, oh my gosh, I have to do this again. How am I going to handle that? How am I going to deal with that? And even just the fact that I've thought about that before, I think helps so much for when it happens in that moment. But when you're not prepared for that and something kind of sidelines you or blindsides you in the middle of the race and something you weren't prepared for, that's when things can go bad. So anyways, I think what to take away from that is just be prepared for absolutely everything. Forward think about any possible scenario, any negative thought that might come up during the race, and how are you going to manage it when it comes on race day, and do all that ahead of time. So Dan and I started the descent from Jaws back down to Footbridge. This was mile 48 down to 66. And we're going basically back down that big climb that I just did. So we lose 5,000 feet over 18 miles. And if you've never done one of these mountainous races before, you hear downhill and you say, oh, downhill's easy. You get a coast. You get to just float down and use gravity. I wish it was that way. It's definitely not. The downhills, yes, they take less effort. Your heart rate tends to be lower. You're using less energy, but it is so much pounding and impact on your quads and your knees and your toes that if you don't properly train for the downhills, it will destroy you. That's what happened my first year when I did the 52-mile race. I got destroyed by the downhills. The last 20 miles of the race, I ended up just walking because I was not trained, was not prepared for the downhills, and I couldn't run anymore. My quads and my knees literally could not handle the downhills. So as easy as the downhills might seem, they are just as hard as the uphills, I can promise you. So Dan and I started this downhill descent down to Footbridge. It was cold. We had to go through the mud again. It was wet. I think the temperatures got down to like the 30s. So you go from hot, where it was like 80 earlier in the day, and sunny, and I'm starting to cramp up because it's so damn hot. Now I'm cold because it's night and I'm wet. Crazy fluctuations in temperature and just conditions as a whole on this course. And I think because of the cold, I started getting really tired, also because I'd been running for so long. And I was just getting really sleepy. And basically how Dan and I were structuring it was he would run in front of me, and he kind of could gauge the pace that I was at. I think he could also hear me running behind him. So he would kind of set the pace, and I was just following him. I didn't have to think too much. I would just say in my mind, okay, Dan's walking here, let's just walk. As soon as Dan starts running, I'll start running. And we just kind of did this run walk all the way down the mountain. And it took us another 4 or 5 hours to get back down to Footbridge, mile 66. This is where I changed my socks and my shoes. I was wearing the Speedland, the GS Tam. That's the orange Speedland. I wore those for the first 66 miles. They were fantastic. But because they were still soaking wet and muddy and everything, and I knew that the next 34 miles of the race, the last 34, there wasn't going to be any mud that I could safely get away with changing my socks and shoes, and not have to worry about them getting wet and muddy again, which was nice. So changed out there, saw the crew again at mile 66 at Footbridge. At this point, it was 2 a.m., so in the middle of the night, peak darkness. And then we left Footbridge, headed up to Dry Fork. So this would be from mile 66 to mile 83. And this was where we had to now go back up the wall, the infamous wall. It's I want to say it's a 3-mile climb, and you have about 3,000 feet of elevation. So it is short, punchy, and very, very steep. You gain about 1,000 feet per mile over the course of 3 miles. And this honestly just wiped me out. I'm generally a pretty good climber, but when I've already ran 66, 67 miles, it's 2 a.m, and I got to go up this real steep climb, I was just gassed by the time we got to the top. And this kind of just zapped me for the rest of the race, to be honest. I think I might have pushed maybe a little bit too hard on the wall and wasted a little bit too much energy, because I was zonked after this. Also, on the wall, very interesting thing happened. There was this guy. Well, first, Dan and I could just see these 3 colored lights like swirling off in the distance, and we're like, "What the hell is that?" We thought it was maybe like somebody like from the race. I don't know, like we didn't know what it was. Couldn't figure it out. It was just these three colored balls swirling off in the distance. As we got closer, we could see that it was a guy juggling these colored balls on the side of a mountain at 3 a.m. And we're like, I asked Dan, I was like, are you seeing this? What, am I hallucinating or what is this? And he's like, no, dude, I see it too. And I trusted him because he had ran like 50 miles less than me. And we got closer to it, and I could see it was a guy in a suit off the trail, like 100 yards, just on the side of the mountain, juggling some colored balls at 3 a.m. And I yelled over, I was like, are you real? I took a video of this on my phone. I was like, are you real? And he's like, I'm starting to question if I am real. I've been up here juggling these balls for so long. And I'm like, what in the world? And Dan and I just started laughing, and we're like, oh, this is bizarre. Just one of the weirdest things I've seen at 3 a.m. on a side of a mountain as a guy juggling. So that was fun. If I was by myself, I would have been crapping my pants. I'd be like, what is happening? But thankfully, Dan was there to keep me grounded. Very, very interesting experience there. After we got to the top of the wall, we were around mile 70. Again, this is where I just felt totally zapped. And I'm like, I started falling asleep while I was running. I was so tired. The sleep demons, you could call them, are very real. I was just exhausted. Like I can still feel that feeling right now where if I just close my eyes, my feet are going to keep moving, but my mind might fall asleep. Never experienced that before in my life. When I've heard people say, oh, I fell asleep while I was running, I was like, how do you do that? How do you fall asleep while you're running? Like, running is such a hard, exerting activity. How do you fall asleep while you're doing it? And it's very real. When you've been going for so long, at that point, I was going for, 17, 18 hours. My feet were just in this like subconscious rhythm all day. And my mind just got really tired. And I didn't actually fall asleep, but I considered several times taking a dirt nap, just pulling off the side of the trail, taking a quick 5-minute dirt nap. It was also at this point when the sun was starting to come up, but it was behind the mountains. So it was like this kind of weird gray light. It was bright enough that I didn't need a headlamp, and my headlamp wasn't really doing anything at that point. So I just shut it off. So it was like, it wasn't really bright, but it wasn't dark. It was like this weird gray zone kind of thing. And this is when it just got really hard, around mile 70 to 80. And this is when I started questioning if I should quit, started questioning why the hell am I doing this, thinking about I still have 25, 30 miles to go. Like, what is the point of all this? And I just had to remind myself that this is why we signed up, for this exact moment when I want to quit, when I start telling myself and trying to negotiate with myself, why are we doing this? We don't need to keep doing this. You have these two parts of your brain arguing with each other, and it's this constant. This is one of my biggest takeaways from the race. Is ultramarathons, the reason they're so hard is because it's so much of this. One part of your brain is saying, let's keep going, and the other part of your brain is saying, let's stop. And it's this constant, never-ending dialogue argument in your mind every single second. One part saying, let's keep going, one part saying, let's stop. So let's go, let's stop, let's stop, let's go, let's go, let's stop. It's just like never-ending. And it is exhausting. It is mentally so exhausting because it's a decision you have to make every single second to keep going. And when you do that over 15 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours, it's just, at some point, you're going to give in and say, okay, we're done. You don't have to give in, but it definitely is easier to give in at that point because you've been doing it for so long and you're so tired. And I think that when people DNF and they come, I think when people DNF one of these races, not due to an injury, it's because that their mind is just so exhausted to that constant back and forth, that constant decision making. And I experienced that 100%. And so I don't know how you train that necessarily. I think one way is potentially look like cold plunging or just doing hard things on a daily basis, and understanding that dialogue and being able to visualize that dialogue from an objective perspective, I think that can help a lot. Like, I love cold plunging every day. I do it as often as I can because the first 30 seconds of a cold plunge, that dialogue gets triggered. It's the fight or flight response. One part of your brain is saying, no, let's fight this. Let's keep going. We can do this. And the other part's saying, no, this is uncomfortable. We got to stop. And you know in your mind that your body can keep going. You trained for this. You're going to be fine. You can get through it. People run 100 milers all the time. Why can't you? And so it's just trying to navigate that conversation and being able to have the mental strength to push through and to continue making the decision to keep moving forward. So that's honestly probably one of my biggest takeaways from this. And that's when I experienced it, was from mile 70 to 80. And I think it took me a good couple hours to work through all of this. And by the time I got to Dry Fork at mile 83, the sun was up. I knew I was picking up Pierce, my last pacer. I knew that would be the last main section of the race. And I felt like this big burst of energy when I got to mile 83 because I'd worked through all this shit already. I knew, like, if I was going to quit, it was going to be between mile 70 to 83. And the fact that I didn't quit there, I got to Dry Fork, got to this last big aid station. I knew in my head, okay, we're going to get this thing done. But man, there were plenty of lows in there. There were plenty of times where I definitely thought about quitting. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because in that moment, it would have been so easy to stop and just say, I'm done. But I'm so glad that I didn't. So take that as a lesson. Got to Dry Fork. I want to say it was 7:45 a.m., just before 8 a.m. So I'd been going for 23 hours at that point, mile 83. I picked up Piercy Boy. I'm sure you guys all know him if you listen to the podcast. And we started our mostly descent from Dry Fork down to the finish. So mile 83 down to 100. And most of this section is downhill. There is one big uphill. It's called the Hall. And it's about a mile climb, and you gain about 1,000 feet. So similar to the wall, but just shorter. Just a real short, punchy climb. And on this section, again, because I'm more of a stronger climber, I passed a bunch of people going up the Hall. I passed, I think, a total of 5 people in the last 18 miles, or 17 miles. I didn't get past it all. Pierce started like picking out people that we could see further down on the trail, and we'd be like, all right, let's catch up to that guy. And I would just push. And we'd pass that person. We did that 5 times. So we passed a lot of people. Each time I'd pass a person, it gave me so much confidence. And not that like, oh, I'm better than this guy, because I don't care what place I get. I literally could not care less what place I get in this race. But the fact that I'm still able to push and run and move at that speed and faster than some of the other runners around me gave me so much confidence. So thank you, Pierce, if you're listening to this. Thank you for pushing me, picking out the runners to go and pass. And this was also the point in the race. I think it was right around mile 90. The damn course is so steep downhill, and it's very technical that you can't really run. You can't like get good momentum. You can't get a good flow going. So you're kind of like tiptoeing, like stomping your way down the mountain because it's just so steep. And the trail is really narrow, and there's like grass kind of overhanging the edges of the trail. And so there's all these little rocks, and I kept stubbing my toe on these rocks that I couldn't really see because the grass overhanging. And I stubbed it once. I was like, oh, that hurt. You guys know how it feels to stub your toe. It's just like hard to explain feeling, but you know what I'm talking about. Did it once, did it a second time, hurt even worse the second time. I could feel my toe throbbing. And then about 30 seconds later, I did it again for the third time. I slammed my toe into a rock, the same toe that I had already hit twice just a couple minutes later. And I was like, there's a video of it on my Instagram and my YouTube. And I'm like, pull off to the side of the trail, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that hurt so bad. That frustrating feeling of stubbing your toe, and you're mad at nobody besides yourself. Like, there's literally nobody to blame in that moment besides myself, because I'm not picking my feet up. Maybe I need to go a little bit slower, pay more attention. Whatever it is, there's nobody to blame besides myself. So I'm just pissed at myself. And I yell out. I'm like, oh! I yell so loud, and just it hurts so bad. And I told Pierce, I was like, dude, I think that toenail is a goner. Like it felt like my toenail got shoved up into my toe. Fortunately, it didn't. I'm definitely gonna lose the toenail. I'm looking at my toe now. It's purple. It's bruised. It's still a little swollen. Definitely broke the toe at mile 90. But you know what? It made for a good story. And I also learned you don't really need your toes to run. If you've got good running shoes on, at this point, I had the Ultramarathon Blancs on. I didn't, like, as long as I can move my legs, like I could kind of just heel strike a little bit more and run back on the heels of my feet. And I don't really need my toes that much, especially running downhill for the most part. So yeah, that was fun. And then the last 5 miles of the race, so from 95 to 100, were on this flat dirt road, and it just feels never ending. Honestly, I'd rather run on a trail for 5 miles than this like flat, boring dirt road. But when you make it to that dirt road, you know that you're on the home stretch. You're like rounding third base, heading for home. You're coming to this little tiny town called Dayton, Wyoming. And it's almost like it feels like a victory lap. Like it's a flat dirt road again, so you don't have to like think too much. There's no rocks or trails or roots or anything. You can just kind of turn your brain off and just run for 45 minutes, an hour, and that's when I kind of like relived the race. I started going back in my mind, remembering all the things I went through over the last 26 hours, all the ups and downs, all the times I felt good, the times I felt like quitting, all the people I saw out there, how great the crew was, seeing the camera guys out there, my amazing pacers, just reliving everything from the race. And it was really just like a victory lap almost, because I knew at that point I was going to finish it. I had more than enough time. I had the cutoff was 35 hours, so I was coming in around 26. So I knew I had like 9 hours to finish the race, to run 5 miles basically, to be able to finish and get the belt buckle. So we knew we were going to get it done. And that last 5 miles was long, but it was a good time to kind of reflect on everything that we just went through. So we came in, Pierce and I, to the race finishes in the town park in Dayton, Wyoming. 26 hours, 48 minutes, and we were finishers of the Bighorn 100. And as much as this is a single individual sport, and you can do these things without a crew, I like doing it with a crew, with pacers, because it feels more like a team effort. It feels like a team mission and accomplishment when you go out and do it. It's not just Jeremy going out and running 100 miles. Like, yes, I could, but it would be a heck of a lot harder, and it would have taken a lot longer, and it wouldn't have been nearly as fun, because I got to do it with my friends, my family, Bree, my fiance. It adds a whole nother element to this race. And that was actually one of the questions I got was, do you think you could do a 100-mile race like this without a crew? 100%. People do it all the time. Andy Glaze, you guys probably know Andy. He did it without a crew or pacers, just relied on drop bags and the aid stations. Steve Bayardi, one of the guys that I've been coaching for a couple years, he ran the Bighorn 100. First trail race, he's done some like 50 milers, but first trail race, and he crushed it. And he didn't have any pacers. He had one crew member. His girlfriend was out there, and he did it. So it's definitely doable to do these things without a crew, without pacers. But again, it makes it much easier, and I think it makes it more enjoyable. Yes, I think these things are inherently selfish. Like, let me pull together all these people to go help me run 100 miles. It's selfish to an extent, but I love being able to tag people in and making it more of like a team thing, because it just means more to me. It makes it more special, I think, because you get to share this suffering. The crew is also out there without sleep. They're hungry. They're tired. They're driving around. I think Bree and Drew drove a total of 11 hours trying to navigate through the mountains in the middle of the night and doing all this stuff. It's just like, as much as I'm out there suffering, they're also suffering in another way. So can't thank the crew enough. Yes, it's possible without the crew, but it makes it so much easier for me and makes it more enjoyable. And it's just a fun experience to share with close friends and family. So there's that. Now I'm going to dive into, I think that was about 45 minutes, potentially, maybe 50 minutes Hopefully you guys are still with me. That's the race recap. Now I'm going to dive into the lessons learned from the Bighorn 100. One of my first takeaways was we are not our thoughts. You guys have maybe heard this before. Other people talk about it, but I definitely experienced it firsthand. And I kind of briefly touched on it earlier. It's like our thoughts come and go wherever they come from. We are not in control of our thoughts. Our brains, our subconscious minds just shoot thoughts into our minds. And we then have the power and the control to do with those thoughts whatever we wish. We can think about them. We can ignore them. We can tell people about it, whatever. But we, at the end of the day, we are not our thoughts. And in that moment, from mile 70 to 83, when I kept wanting to quit, I wanted to quit so bad, it hurt so bad, those thoughts just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. There are all these thoughts, but I chose to not think about them as much. I chose to think about the positive ones. I chose to think about them from more of an objective perspective. So I just love the idea that our thoughts don't define us. We are not our thoughts. We have the power to think about our thoughts however we want to. There's a difference between thinking and thoughts. The next lesson I learned was presence is essential. Being present, being in the moment, being where your feet are. I think that's almost everything with these races, because if you're not here, if you're not being present, where else are you? You're thinking about how many miles you still have left. You're thinking about how many miles you've already ran. Oh my gosh, I've already ran 30 miles. My legs are so beat. They're so tired. Oh my gosh, I still have 45 miles to run. I'm so tired. How am I going to run 45 more miles when I've already ran 30 miles? Like, you're just in this weird space that's not here. But when you're here in this exact moment, that's all you can think about. There's no room for anything else. When you are right here, you're thinking about right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. I am here on this trail right now. That's all I'm doing. And I think when you're in that present moment, it's impossible to quit. It's impossible to stop. It's impossible to fail, because you're only in that moment. You have no other capacity to think about anything else. I think inevitably your mind's gonna drift at some point, but the goal, I think, is to be in the present moment as much as possible. And when I found myself mile 70 to 83 wanting to quit in that really low moment, I had to keep telling myself, okay, just be present, just be here right now, be where your feet are, be here now. That's what I kept telling myself. Those 3 words: be here now. Powerful statement, powerful combo of 3 words. And I don't know where it came from. Maybe I read it somewhere. I don't know. But be here now became my mantra for that section. And when you're just here in the present moment, you can't be anywhere else. Third lesson I learned is nothing is permanent. These are all kind of tied together, but those negative thoughts, those negative feelings, the pain in your legs, nothing is permanent. Nothing will ever stay the same. That's how the world works. That's how life works. My legs were in probably the worst pain ever just 5 days ago, and now I'm sitting here talking to you and I feel fine, because nothing is permanent. When I felt really shitty at mile 20 because it was so hot and I was starting to cramp, look at how I felt just a few hours later once the temperature went down and I cooled off and I felt fine. Nothing is permanent. And I think in an ultramarathon, it's so easy when you get into a bad state and you just start thinking, like for some reason, your brain just thinks, this is how I'm going to feel forever. This is how I'm going to feel the rest of my life, the rest of this race. But it's so not true. Nothing's permanent. You have so many ups and downs in a race like this. So just know that when you are feeling down, that at some point you will feel better again. You're going to feel up again. And same thing for the ups. Like, I don't think you should lean too far into the good feelings, because just as quick as they came, they're probably going to go away and you're going to feel down again. And so it's all about just riding the waves. You have to ride the waves as they come. Think about yourself out on the ocean. You can't fight the waves. If you fight the waves, you're going to get capsized. And that's what happens during an ultramarathon. You have to just be a boat out in the ocean, bobbing and weaving, taking the ebbs and flows as they come. And you're kind of just this like passenger on the ups and downs. And that's how I think you can get through a lot of these difficult long races. Fourth thing I learned is pain is just a feeling. And what I mean by that is everybody has their own relationship with pain. And I'm speaking about physical pain. Obviously, physical pain is what you feel the most during an ultramarathon. The pain in your legs, in your feet, in your toes, wherever. And that pain, it's simply a feeling. Like if, for example, if my legs are just hurting so bad, it doesn't mean I'm injured. It's not like I'm going to feel that pain tomorrow, but that's just the pain that I happen to be feeling now. And it's just like for me, when I've come to understand that pain is a feeling, and then when I realize that we can control our feelings, we can control how we feel, you can kind of just take that pain and not think about it. You can, again, I think pain is also a thought in some sense of like, when you feel pain, it is simply a signal your brain is sending out into your body. Or maybe it's the other way around. Your body is sending a signal up to your brain, but it's just a thought. And you don't have to pay attention to that thought. You don't have to indulge and give into that thought. You can just say, okay, my legs are tired. That's fine. I'm going to keep going because that's simply how my legs feel right now. But that doesn't mean I have to feel that way. I haven't fully been able to put this into words yet, but that phrase of pain is just a feeling gets me through a lot because feelings are temporary. Feelings are not permanent. Feelings come and go. And when you realize that pain is just another one of those feelings, it seems to make it more understandable and more it's easier to get through it because you understand like, oh, it's just a feeling. And the final lesson I learned, I guess this is kind of multiple things in one, but your feet, your stomach, your effort level, your mindset, and your crew, those 5 things I think are the most important things to manage from a physical, tactical standpoint in a race. So your feet, huge. You're on your feet. I took 208,000 steps. You got to take care of your feet, lube them up, wear cotton or wool toe socks like I did, manage your shoes, figure out all this in training, manage your feet. Feet are huge. Stomach, again, fortunate enough to not really have any stomach issues. Got to manage your stomach, figure out your nutrition early on in your training, practice with it, try a million different things, try solid foods, try liquids, try gels, whatever you got to do to figure out your stomach. Effort level, like RPE received, or what does RPE stand for? I don't have a brain fart. Rate of perceived exertion. I'm sorry. This is how much effort you're exerting at any given point in time. A 100-mile race is so long. If you're coming from marathons, a 100-mile race is 20, 30, 40 times harder, and it feels 20, 30, 40 times longer. So managing your effort level, obviously you can't go out running a 100-mile race at like 80% effort level. You're going to smoke yourself. You got to go out at like 50%, like 5 out of 10 RPE. You got to find that effort level that you can manage for a long period of time, 24 hours, 30 hours, however long your race is. So managing effort and figuring that out during training, testing things. Test when you push too hard. What does that feel like when you're test when you finish a long 4-hour training run and you feel great? Think about how hard you were pushing during that effort, during that training run. And then mindset. Mindset, I mean, that's what I've talked about the most during this podcast is just plan ahead, forward think to any possible scenario, work things out in your head ahead of time, do things like a cold plunge or do things daily that are going to trigger that fight or flight response, and you learn to control it and manage it. And then lastly is crew. Again, you can do these things without a crew, but having a crew that is all on the same page. Like I made this PDF of everything I could possibly think of that the crew might need to know, turn-by-turn directions, GPS coordinates, what I need at each aid station, what time I think I'll be there, all these different things. Have that lined out. And then also a very, very, very important thing to tell your crew, which I told my crew before this race. I don't care how bad I look. I don't care how bad I say I want to quit. As long as I am not physically injured or my health is at risk in some way, do not let me quit. Just tell me I look good. Tell me I'm looking strong. Tell me I can keep going. Do not let me quit. I've been on crews where the crew has like an emotional or family connection to the runner, and they see them in pain, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you don't look very good. Or we should maybe talk to somebody, maybe talk to the medical people, see if you need to get looked at. Like you're looking really beat down. You don't need to do this. You don't have to do this race. You can stop now. It's gonna be okay. We'll still love you." Screw that. Get your crew on the page of, I don't care, again, unless I'm physically injured or my health is at risk, do not let me quit this race. I don't care how bad I'm negotiating with you. Do not let me quit. Because 99% of the time, you're going to be fine and you can get through the race, but you got to make sure your crew is on the same page. So feet, effort, mindset, and crew. Those are the 5 most important tactical things that I think you should be prepared for your 100-mile race. Okay, that's an hour in. Let's go into the Q&A, shall we? So I pulled a bunch of questions from you guys from Instagram, tried to kind of put them into order and group them into questions that I feel like most everybody had. So how long did I train for this race, and what was my peak mileage? When people ask me this, I will say I've been training for this race for my whole life. The mindset, because this race is so mental, I've been training my whole life for this race. From a physical standpoint, I know that's what you're actually asking. I did the Bighorn 50 in 2022. I did it in 2023. I've done another 50-mile race in the mountains in Arizona earlier this March. I did the 100K in the parking lot last December. I would say all of those were kind of in mind to eventually run 100 miles. Again, maybe not the exact answer you want. So the proper training block for this race probably started in February. I'd say early February. So February, March, April, May, June, 5 months. But 100-mile race requires cumulative fitness. It requires years of training. Maybe not years. People could go out and do it without years of training. But for me, I wanted years of training. I wanted years of experience so that I could now 4 days later still be able to go run and not be completely wrecked and be able to perform at my best. So the proper training block was about 4 or 5 months. But again, I've been training for this for years. Peak mileage. I think mileage is probably the worst way to train for a 100-mile race just because mileage doesn't really matter. 10 miles from the start to Dry Fork is completely different from 10 miles from Dry Fork to Footbridge. So mileage, kind of irrelevant. I think you should really focus on time, spending time on your feet. So my peak time was about 15 hours of running, which ended up being, I think, like 50 or 60 miles because I was trying to get as much vert as possible. And one idea I like to take into training, this is from my friend Zach Bitter, crazy elite ultramarathon runner. He says the goal of any build, whether it's a marathon, a 50K, 100-miler, is to just spend as much time as possible at your race effort. And for a 100-mile race, you can basically spend your entire build at your race effort because it's such a long race. Whereas with a marathon, you can't spend every mile, every hour at your race effort because it's so intense. So you have to find that balance of how can I spend as much time as possible at my race effort without hurting myself, without overtraining. Fortunately for a 100-mile race, you can basically spend 100% of your time training at your race effort because it is such a low effort compared to something like a marathon. But again, peak mileage, peak time on feet was about 15 hours. And also trying to simulate your race as much as possible. So because this race had 18,000 feet of gain and loss, that peak week, I had, I think, 14 or 15,000 feet of gain. So I tried to get as much gain as possible, as much time on my feet as possible. How much did I stop at aid stations? I already kind of went through this, I guess. I stopped at the main aid stations, the 5 where I could see my crew and had drop bags. I stopped at those. I think I was on average like 6 to 7 minutes maybe. It was not very long. We're very, very efficient. The other aid stations, there were smaller aid stations in between those. I basically would just show up, fill up my waters, and keep going. That's all I needed. I would maybe grab a piece of fruit real quick, but never sat down at any of those aid stations. I would show up, maybe spend a minute there, I think that's where people can just get screwed at these races, is spending way too much time at aid stations. You shouldn't think of aid stations as like a place of rest or a place of recuperation. It should be just a checkpoint in the race and a place where you can grab things you might need to keep going. I think just that simple mindset shift of the aid station is not there for me to sit down and get comfortable and like relax. We want to constantly be moving, constantly be making forward progress, but use that aid station as a boost of energy because you get to see people, you get to see your crew. Use it as a place of refueling, but don't use it as a place of rest. You're in a race setting. There really shouldn't be any rest, in my opinion. If you're really beat down and you're getting just exhausted, maybe sitting down for 5 minutes might help. But I think treating aid stations just like a quick pit stop, like in and out as fast as possible. Don't waste time there. Did I sleep at all? No, but I thought about it, as you previously heard. Really, for a 100-mile race, you don't need to sleep. You end up missing one night of sleep. That's very common. Most people do not sleep during a 100-mile race. I think until you get to maybe 150 or to 200-mile races. Also, apparently, we just skipped from hundreds to basically straight to 200-mile races, which is crazy. But yeah, for the multi-day things that are going to take more than 2 or 3 days, I think you definitely have to sleep. But for a 100-mile race, generally it's going to take less than 30 to 35 hours for most people, so you don't really need to sleep. But also, I think people should be open to sleeping. I was definitely open to sleeping if I needed to. Like if I really felt like I cannot run anymore unless I get 5 minutes of sleep, I was open to that idea, but I obviously didn't need to. So I think you should be open to that as well. Thoughts on the Speedlands versus Ultras? I love the Speedlands. Freaking love the Speedlands. And I will say the reason I use the Ultra Mont Blanc and the Speedlands is because the Ultra Mont Blancs are really similar to the Speedlands. They feel very, very similar. Obviously, Ultras are going to be zero drop. I feel like the foam on the Ultra isn't quite as springy and squishy. Doesn't have as much energy return. But the Ultras are just so stable. Like Ultras, I feel like Ultras are my favorite hiking shoe, or like when I'm late in a race and I just need like a little bit more stability. I'm not really running that fast. I don't mind having the Ultras there. But the Speedlands, the Speedlands are by far my favorite trail shoe I've ever worn. They're so good. To me, the way I describe it is the Speedlands are a road shoe with the stability and traction of a trail shoe. Obviously on trails, you want something a little bit wider, something more stable, something with traction, but I feel like other trail shoes just feel like flat or kind of dead. Like you don't get that spring in your step. Like it's hard to run fast in an Ultra shoe, I feel like. But in Speedlands, I feel like I can actually pick up the pace and run a little bit more. So big fan of Speedlands. I wore them for the first 66 miles. I just got the new black Cam Hanes edition. They are $275. They're pricey, but definitely worth it in my opinion. What watch did I use? I wore the Coros Apex 2, or no, sorry, that was my old watch. Coros Vertix 2S. I got this about a month or two ago. Love the Coros. Big fan of Coros. I switched from Garmin a couple years ago, and I don't know if I'll ever go back. Huge fan of Coros. The battery life on this is absolutely nuts. Typically, I get like a full month out of it with like regular GPS use. On the race, because I was using the navigation and I was like flipping back and forth through screens quite a bit, that really sucks it down. So I went from 100% down to like 30. But again, I was using navigation, didn't really need to. I just like the navigation during a race. So not essential. If I didn't use the navigation, I probably still would have been at like 70% or 80%. But yeah, big fan of Coros. Would I do anything differently in training now that I've had time to reflect on the race? That's a great question. I feel like there's always something you can adjust. I would say figuring out my feet. Because I got so many blisters, I feel like there's still things to be learned with my feet. And I don't fully know what it is. I think just testing different things with having wet feet, running up and down mountains. I will say, I think a big part of it too is like I don't have mountains in Austin. I think the mountains and the ups and downs and like the technical trails is what really brings out the worst in my feet, because you get these long 18-mile climbs and long 18-mile downhills, and you just don't get that in Texas. So like if I were to go back and do something different in my training, I don't think I would do anything differently, to be honest, other than maybe get out to the mountains again and just like spend more time. But like my stomach was great. My body felt great. My legs were good. I guess maybe I would probably do one more sleep deprivation run just to figure out the sleep. Because I did one run where I ran from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. and I didn't feel tired at all. And that's why the sleep demons during Bighorn really surprised me and kind of blindsided me, because when I did that 4-hour run overnight in Austin about a month or two ago, I didn't feel tired at all. And I thought, okay, maybe it's the adrenaline. I'm just excited. But I also didn't take into account that I would already be running 12 hours plus now going into the night. So maybe some more sleep deprivation training, but that's also a fine balance, because like when you're in peak training, you don't want to be losing sleep and messing with your sleep schedule, because that can lead to injury. So I don't know. I'm up in the air on the sleep thing, but again, really the only problems I had during the race were sleep and feet. So if I can figure out those two things, I think I'll be good for the next ones. Yeah, great question though. I'm going to be thinking about that one quite a bit. Marathon PR versus a 50 miler versus a 100 miler. What is the hardest, and which one do I enjoy more? Let's start with the hardest. So 100 miler, definitely the hardest. Oh, actually, I would say this. I think a marathon PR is physically much harder from a physical standpoint. You have to be much more dialed in terms of your nutrition. Everything has to go perfectly on race day physically. You don't have enough time really to come back from an issue during a marathon, because it's short enough that it's just not enough time really to come back if you have any issues. And the marathon effort is so fast. It's so hard that you're like just right under that lactate threshold for 2.5, 3, 4 hours, whatever your marathon time is, 2:44 for me. You're just right on that line, and it's a very fine line. And if you go over it just a smidge, you're going to blow up. So I would say from a physical standpoint, and again, during a marathon, my heart rate's like 180 for 2.5, 3 hours. At no point during this 100-mile race did my heart rate ever get above like 160 or 165. So from a physical standpoint, marathon's definitely harder. 50 miler, going before this race, I thought 50 miler was the hardest thing I'd ever done. And it was. But now a 50 miler seems like nothing after doing the 100. I would say the 100-mile race, I would say it was 4 times as hard as the 50 milers. Again, this is all mountainous 50, mountainous 100. I would say a 50 miler is twice as hard as a marathon. This is more from a mental standpoint. The 100 miler was probably 4 times as hard as the 50 miler from a mental standpoint. Yeah, these are great questions. I don't know if I'm giving good answers or not, but the marathon's definitely physically hardest. 100 miler for sure mentally harder. It's just, again, going back to that constant decision making to keep going. That's just so mentally exhausting, and you're doing that for more than a day. That's hard. That's very hard. But honestly, I think my body recovered because the effort level is so low. I think my body recovered faster from the 100-mile race than it did my last marathon PR. So that's saying something. And what did I enjoy more? I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully answer that question. I think the marathon is so much fun because it's so dialed in. It's so scientific. There's a formula to it. It's short. It's fast. You're pushing yourself really, really hard. It's over with very quickly. I like that a lot. That's fun. I will say this. I think marathons are more fun, but I think ultramarathons are more enjoyable. And I feel like I get more out of an ultramarathon. It's more of an experience with an ultramarathon. Because it's just so long, you experience the ups and downs, the life in a day that you get to experience. And yeah, I think ultras are just more enjoyable as a whole. You're usually somewhere beautiful. Like most marathons are in a city. I'm not a big city guy. I love being in the mountains. I love being in nature. And most ultras, or the ultras that I want to do at least, are all in the mountains. And I love being in the mountains. So, long answer, but marathons are physically harder. Ultramarathons are mentally harder. I think marathons are more fun. I think ultras are more enjoyable. So, take that as you will. 2 more questions. What's the transition like from marathon to ultra? If you're trying to transition from, if you've done a marathon and you want to get into ultra, say 50K, 50 miler, 100 miler, you can more than do it, because again, if you're physically capable of running a marathon, you can run a 50 miler, you can run a 100 miler. You have what it takes physically. Training is a little different. You don't really need speed work for ultras because you're never getting up to that speed in the race. Speed work can help. It builds more fitness, but you don't really need speed work. I think the biggest thing to train, again, like I talked about earlier, is your feet. Getting used to being on your feet for so long, managing what might happen to your feet, your stomach, figuring out your nutrition, managing your effort level, finding what that 100-mile effort and pace is for you. Your mindset is massive for these, obviously. And if you're mentally strong enough to get through a marathon, I think you definitely have what it takes to do a 100-mile race. It's going to be longer. It's going to be, from I say a marathon starts at mile 20, from 20 to 26. That's basically how it is during a 100-mile race from mile 70 to 100. Is the halfway point in a marathon is mile 20. The halfway point in a 100-mile race is mile 70. So it's just more drawn out, basically. Yeah, I would say figure out your feet, stomach, effort level, and your mindset. And then training-wise, it's honestly pretty easy. You just spend a lot of time running at your kind of 100-mile effort. It's not too complicated. Last question, what's next? Am I going to run Bighorn again? Am I going to run a 200-mile race? I don't know. I don't fully know. I will definitely do more 100-milers, without a doubt. It was fun. It was hard. It was everything that I expected. I learned so much about myself. I had fun with the crew. I would definitely do another 100-miler. I would probably do Bighorn again. I don't know if I'll do Bighorn again next year, but I would definitely do it again. It's an amazing race. It's a hometown race. I love the mountains. Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking about it as I'm giving this answer, but I would definitely do Bighorn again. Maybe not next year. For sure, 100-milers. I think the big 100-mile races like Hard Rock, Western States, maybe Leadville. Leadville's getting so mainstream now, though. I don't know if I would do Leadville, to be honest. I feel like everybody's done Leadville. But Western States, I mean, that's the original 100-mile race. Hard Rock, the hardest 100-mile race in the country, according to most people. I would do all of those. The races over in Switzerland and in Europe really fascinate me. Like in the Swiss Alps, there's like UTMB. There's tons of races over there that I think would be really, really fun. And I think it'd be great to just go and run through a new mountain range I've never been in. 200s, I don't know about 200s. I'm not super intrigued by spending 3 or 4 days out in the mountains, like with no sleep. It's mostly the no sleep that I'm not interested in the 200s. I would love to be in the mountains for 3 or 4 days, but I don't want to be in the mountains for 3 or 4 days without sleep or with very minimal sleep. I've been at 200-mile races and people look like zombies, and that doesn't fascinate me that much. I think it's fascinating that people can run 200 miles. I just don't know if it fascinates me to go out and do it personally. Maybe eventually I might change my mind. This stuff is like a drug, but I think I would rather do a lot of the big, cool 100-mile races before taking on a 200 and feel like really comfortable at the 100-mile distance before taking on a 200. I'll say this, I probably will do one at some point. I just don't know when. It won't be anytime soon. I definitely want to run a fast marathon. I don't think I've said this anywhere yet, but within the next year, I want to run like a 2:39 marathon for sure. I want to break 2:40. My current PR is 2:44. So at some point, I would like to run another fast marathon. But honestly, Bighorn 100 was like my main objective for 2024. I've been thinking about it for years. Been thinking about it like nonstop for the last 6 months. And it's crazy that it's already over with. I'm so grateful for my body, grateful for my coach, Justin Kinner, grateful for my crew, for the camera guys, for my pacers, for everybody that came out, all the people online that supported me, sent me messages, DMs, comments, listen to the podcast. Can't thank all of you guys enough, because without you, I literally would not be able to do this. It's so much gratitude for all you people out there. So thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Solo episode. Basically done. I think we covered everything. Appreciate you guys for listening. There will be a Bighorn 100 film. I keep mentioning these camera guys, Drew and Bradford. Drew B. Darby, he's been on the podcast. You've probably recognized him maybe from Sally McRae's content. He shoots a lot of her stuff. Drew is the man, one of my great friends, and he was gracious enough to come out and film with Bradford as well. Andrew Bradford, another great friend, and Drew's going to be putting together a Bighorn 100 film. I think it'll be out by the end of the year, if not early 2025. It's going to be fantastic knowing Drew. It's going to be top-tier ultramarathon film, telling some of my story that maybe some of you guys never heard. So I look forward to it. It's going to be fantastic. We'll let you guys know more details when it's going to be coming out. But thank you so much for listening to this episode. We covered a lot. I hope I provided some inspiration, some knowledge, some insight for you guys to take into your next ultramarathon or 100-mile race or whatever you end up doing. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for listening. I'm peacing out. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you in the next one.